This is going to be a little bit of a treat. So get ready, because we really want to throw you right in the middle of this. So many of us in public health and health philanthropy struggle sometimes to communicate. We recognize that communication is a huge part of what we do in trying to improve health. And when I started my job, one of the things that struck me, I came from a public health department into philanthropy, and I was struck by the fact that there was this huge communication staff. And in public health department, we had one, basically, we call them a PIO, the public information officer, who handled everything. But we had this big communication staff, and I was suspicious of it initially because I thought, who are these high-priced people getting paid to just yak, yak, yak? I mean, I'm doing the work. Why are they getting all the pay? And as I came to sort of understand sort of what our role was, I started to really appreciate communications. I always knew it was important, but I began to realize that it was essential. And one of the things that we realized at the California Endowment about communications is that there's this role in communications that's beyond just telling people about what's happening. It's really about trying to understand narratives that are out there, because narratives shape policy, and policy creates conditions. And we're trying to respond to conditions over and over again. We look at policy, but oftentimes we don't look at the narrative that's creating that policy. And we're in the midst of that right now with the presidential primaries, where you see two competing narratives. One is really about a narrative of exclusion, where certain people are vilified, they're othered, they're referred to as rapists or murderers or pursuing Sharia law. They're somehow different from us and therefore need to be excluded and pushed to the side and in some ways dehumanized. And then there's a competing narrative which is really about inclusion, and it's about humanization, and it's about equity and equal opportunity and shared responsibility. And these two narratives have been dominant narratives since the creation of this country and before. And these narratives shape the policies that create the opportunities for people that we care about. So being involved in reshaping the narrative is important work. And that's why this is such a treat, this particular panel that we're going to talk about now. It's called The Bigger Picture, and I'm going to let it sort of unveil itself as we present. But the bigger picture is really the product of an unlikely partnership between a doctor and a poet, and how they use their skills to essentially work to change the narrative about diabetes. And I'm just going to throw us right into this because I think this is a lot of fun. We're going to start with an incredible poet who goes by the name Frak. And I know he must be good. He's certainly literate because he went to the same school that my daughter goes to. It's a very expensive school, so. And with that, we're just going to go straight into Frak. So come on up, Frak.
Hey everyone, I'm Frak. Now you all know I can read. So we did a video called Candyman, which you're gonna see in a second. And I guess the question we asked was, how could sugar be personified? How could sugar, if sugar was a villain, what would he sound like? So here's the rap. And yeah, you'll see it in video form later, but I'll just go into it. They call me sugar and honey, it's like they really love me. But I'm just looking for money, yeah, just the way you're hungry. Disguised behind dextrin and fructose, dextrose and glucose, invisible when I'm too close. They advertise me with athletes and celebrities, hidden behind bodies too pristine for my recipe. I'm targeted to low-income teens. Start the habit, spark the addict flowing in your bloodstream. They raise the price on fruits and veggies, but cheapen me. My mind's too refined, you're blind to the obesity. They undress me, compress me, and then they liquidize. Serve me in ounces too big in size for little guys. You feel the rush, you're energized. The crash, you're hypnotized. That miniature high is where addiction lies. The ads tell you be happy with your own skin inside, but they fatten you up, I'm still alive by dinner time. This vicious cycle is in your spinal and in your mind. I'm crawling on your hollow bones, I'm killing lives. I'm your neighborhood's pesticide. The safest playground is Mickey D's. Exercise means bigger fries. The food courts are mortified from New York to Uruguay. The average 4 to 5-year-old eats 64.5 pounds of my shit, cut down and purified. That's their own weight in sugar every 365. I disintegrate on your tongue. Euphoria lasts a second. You're soaring and energetic. The orange soda and cola are flowing all through your vessels. I'm slowly an epidemic controlling the diabetics. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. I said cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. I'm born as a crop, harvested harmlessly, put into corn syrup, corporations only. Sold overly cheap to the store on a corner of your street. Find me in heartbeats, swollen feet, and corroded teeth. These corporations are the Mozarts of cornstarch. It's only me on your wood shelves and store carts. The people hate me but need me because they won't starve. In blue veins, I've tore hearts in 4 parts. Thank you.
Why is a doctor sitting up here with a poet talking to health funders?
So 3 or 4 reasons. So when I started out as a young doctor at San Francisco General Hospital in the 1990s, about 1 in 20, 1 in 25 of my primary care patients had type 2 diabetes. So it was pretty unusual, and most of the people with diabetes were seen by endocrinologists, specialists in diabetes. Now 1 in 2 of my patients has diabetes. And I'm not that old. I just turned 50. So it's in a generation, essentially, that has happened. It's a public hospital, so obviously disproportionately serves low-income people. But I also was raised, as were you in your training, in an era when we experienced the HIV epidemic. And then within a generation, we kind of conquered the HIV epidemic. And I learned a lot about how important community activism is in battling an epidemic. And in the AIDS epidemic, obviously the gay community was extremely instrumental in turning the tide in AIDS. We also grew up in a time when the war on tobacco started to become successful. And what I learned there was the importance of secondhand smoke as the key vehicle to changing the policies and the conditions. And so in my work as Chief of Diabetes Prevention and Control for the state of California, I was continually frustrated by the absence of a secondhand smoke equivalent for diabetes, because we all need to eat and drink, right? And it was my discovery that the epidemic of grandma's disease was now affecting young children that led me to believe that this injustice of children with type 2 diabetes was in a way a secondhand smoke equivalent that we needed to communicate about.
Great. Hodari, poet, educator, sitting in front of a bunch of health funders. How weird is that for you?
I have no idea how I got here.
Because you were here last year.
Yeah, but this is just not, I'm not accustomed to this particular audience. So primarily work with arts funders, youth development funders, education funders. Most of the work that Youth Speaks does centers around developing young people's voices. Our focus, our long-term goal is as agents of social change. And so the bigger picture is an opportunity for us to take these incredibly talented young people and apply their voices very directly to make some kind of social impact, affirm some kind of justice in the world. It's a novel idea.
Okay, well, let's get right into this.
Let's show one.
Let's show Candyland.
Get the money. Mic check 1, 2. cream, get the money.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all.
They call me sugar and honey, it's like they really love me. But I'm just looking for money, yeah, just the way they're hungry. Disguised behind dextrin and fructose, dextrose and glucose. Invisible when I'm too close. They advertise me with athletes and celebrities, hidden behind bodies too pristine for my recipe. I'm targeted to low-income teens. Start the habit, spark the addict flowing in your bloodstream. They raise the price on fruits and veggies, but cheapen meat. My mind's too refined, you're blind to the obesity. They undress me, compress me, and then they liquidize. Serve me an ounce is too big in size for little guys. You feel the rush, you're energized. The crash, you're hypnotized. That miniature high is where addiction lies. The ads tell you be happy with your own skin inside, but they fatten you up, I'm still alive by dinner time. This vicious cycle is in your spinal and in your mind. I'm crawling all your hollow bones, I'm killing lives. I'm your neighborhood's pesticide. The safest playground is Mickey D's. Exercise means bigger fries. The food courts are mortified. From New York to Uruguay, the average 4 to 5-year-old eats 64.5 pounds of my shit. Cut down and purify. That's the wrong weight in sugar every 365. Disintegrate on your tongue. Euphoria lasts a second, you're soaring and energetic. The orange soda and cola are flowing all through your vessels. I'm slowly an epidemic, controlling the diabetics.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all.
I'm born as a crop, harvested harmlessly. Put in the corn syrup, corporations owning me. Sold overly cheap to the store on the corner of the street. Find me in heartbeats, swollen feet and corroded teeth. These corporations are the Mozarts of cornstarch. It's only me on your wood shelves and store carts. The people hate me but need me because they won't starve. In blue veins I've torn hearts in 4 parts.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money.
Dollar, dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, y'all.
What's a nice doctor like you doing with stuff like this? I mean, that's hard-hitting stuff. Tell us a little bit about how this partnership came together.
It was really a fate, good fortune. Hodari's colleague and partner in crime, James Cass, and I, for 15 years played pickup soccer together in a Sunday game in San Francisco. And as I was saying to you before, the soccer field is one of the only places in America where people of all creeds, colors, ethnicities, and professions come together and do something fun. And he and I had for many years chatted about what we each did and had fantasized about someday working together. And he invited me to a fundraiser at Youth Speaks, and I heard a then 17-year-old young woman recite a poem about her struggle with obesity and stress and diabetes. And I actually still getting goosebumps thinking about it now. It was at that moment that I went up to James and I said, "This is, she's the one. She's the answer." And then, then he turned me on to Hodari, and we got to work.
So that must have been a weird introduction.
It was interesting because I think we spend a lot of time at Youth Speaks thinking about the power of the individual voice. And you all were in the room, and Frak was right there, and he literally spit that exact same poem to everybody in this room, and it moves you in a certain way, and you hear certain things, and certain things resonate, and certain imagery comes to mind. And we thought, wow, if we could kind of figure out how to package that and then spread it over a larger geography and get more people to see and experience the moment of this poem. And that's what led to the creation of short films. So the idea that the young woman who started this campaign was 17 when she wrote that poem. She's now in her 20s. She's 150 pounds later. She's 2 degrees later. She doesn't want to recite the poem that she said at 16. And even though it was so transformative for everyone who's heard it, and obviously it sparked this whole campaign, it's still something to note that it's painful for her to continue to recite that poem over and over again. So the poem itself carries a power. How do we take the power in that 3.5 minutes and amplify it as far as possible? And that's really what we've been experimenting with the bigger picture.
So Dean, maybe you can set up Chocolate Smile for us.
Well, the reason, so my frustration when I was working for the health department and trying to move policy around diabetes was that the discourse, the public discourse and the policy discourse at that time, and to a certain extent still today, was about shame and blame, right? These lazy minority people who don't eat right, and how shameful, and casting blame. And nobody was really effectively talking about the social and environmental conditions that are creating the epidemic. And it was you talked about this in the presidential politics. I mean, it was a very big mountain to get over. So the idea with the bigger picture was to find a way to step back from the individual with diabetes and look at the bigger picture around the individual, around her community and family that is causing her to have diabetes, that is causing her, as she says in her poem, as she's wheeling her auntie into her dialysis appointment, eating a Snickers bar, what's causing that? And that's really what's behind the campaign, is looking at the bigger picture.
Great. Can we screen Chocolate Smile?
In my neighborhood, we stay quiet while our sisters stand under street lights, letting the shine adorn their skin. They prance in silver 6-inch heels with clothes that caress their curves coated in chocolate. In my neighborhood, we stay quiet while fiends crave a fix in the form of a fluid, swimming beneath a needle, letting it corrupt their insides and run tracks up their arms and within their damaged veins. In my neighborhood, we stay quiet while our brothers stand on cracked pavement, selling broken dreams in the form of a little blue pill. In my neighborhood, every mouth is wide shut. Rape culture, quiet. Education system, quiet. Police brutality, quiet. Institutionalized racism, quiet. Type 2 diabetes, quiet. Shh. They won't tell you about the little girl who once held the corner store at her fingertips, whose innocence was corrupted with Coke bottles and ho-ho cupcakes. They won't tell you about that sweet smile, feet on pavement, the way her pink knuckleballs used to swing, sipping on chocolate milk like a remembrance of mama's nipples. They won't tell you how she sucked on Tootsie Pops since she was 3 years old, holding lukewarm bottles of soda, too scared she'd lose her grip. Hot Cheeto stains on the collar of her shirt and the side of her lips, stuck in between her teeth, using the tip of her tongue to savor the last of her dose. They won't tell you about that dimple-filled smile, with big gaps and big dreams coated in sugar. The way she hit jawbreakers between her cheek and teeth, turning her smile 3 shades of blue. The ebony of her skin against the rainbow of her smile. Chocolate like beauty, like goddess, like ancestry. Chocolate like Hershey's Kisses building on the back of her neck. Chocolate like she was raised in the center of the hood. With hip-hop, her late-night lullabies, and staticky cable with her Saturday morning breakfast. Chocolate like every corner near her home is adorned with a liquor store. Chocolate like she ain't never heard of Whole Foods. Just a hole in her only food can fill. Chocolate like mama don't have health insurance. Like a trip to the dentist costs more than mama's rent. Chocolate like her teeth becoming one with her skin. This is for the girl who held the corner store at her fingertips, whose mouth used the ring of adrenaline-induced laughter, her sweet smile, now rotting away with her innocence. Jagged teeth in her mouth has her gums aching. They won't tell you how her smile was corrupted by blue slushies and black licorice, leaving brown potholes in their wake. And we still remain quiet while they drain us of everything sweet but the color of our skin and the sugar in our hips. In my neighborhood, our thighs are heavy, our ass is thick, a culture being weighed down by silence.
Had to breathe after that one.
17 years old.
Yeah, I'm struck by how this, her approach is really kind of a critique of sort of the systemic inequity that she contends with on a sort of a day-to-day basis. It's beyond just the sugar. It's sort of like the constellation of forces that have sort of kept her and her community kind of like in this constant state of stress. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, we often in public health talk about vulnerable populations, and that has so many meanings, but we tend to define vulnerable populations as those populations at greatest risk of risks. And that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing that constellation of forces that lead to so many final common pathways that relate to ill health. But I think the other thing that's so tremendous about this poem is the flip side of the vulnerability, which is the resilience. And the ending of that poem, which is so kick-ass, right? It's like we're taking that thing off and we're not going to take it anymore. And that asset, that resilience is, I think, also part of what Hodari's team is so good at curating and mentoring. And, how do you find people like that to make those poems?
Yeah, I mean, I think the process of identifying the young people is a long one because they have to go through cycles of development, finding their voice, developing their voice, presenting their voice. To learn how to apply it in a way that's responsible and effective, it takes time. That particular poet, Marjane Kilpatrick, is just a very dynamic poet. She had been writing up until that point for a long time. She had appeared on our Poetry Slam team. She had traveled to Brave New Voices. And so for this campaign, it's important for us at least to find the voices of young people who are already at a stage where what they say can resonate and make, the hair stand up on your arm. And that's the ultimate test, is finding a poet in a poem who is so moving and compelling in the way that they tell a story that we can figure out how to apply that very specifically to a crisis. I don't think I think type 2 diabetes is an example of that, but it's not the only example. We've been able to apply young people's voices towards mass incarceration. We've been able to look at climate change. We've been able to look at public education. It's just a way to get young people not only representing their own ideas and their own stories, but also perhaps lending their unique skills and ability to articulate ideas to those who may be more silenced or more marginalized in any particular conversation. I mean, obviously, if you're talking about crises in inner city communities like Richmond, like what she's talking about, and she's saying that in a community of silence, she's a spokesperson, which is and then it's visually shown to you on screen. In a community of people who are willfully putting tape over their mouth, she is consciously ripping the tape off. And it requires a certain level of acuity even to get to the point where you can see the world in the way that she's seeing it. So,
well, before we go to our next little film, I'm struck by the fact that this whole notion of changing the narrative is really about changing the stories and changing the storyteller and having people tell their own stories, and that it's remarkable how different that comes across when you're sort of witnessing that. Can you talk a little bit about our next film, Perfect Soldiers, and the Institute of Medicine?
Sure. I mean, I'll just first comment on your comment about the story. I mean, one of the joys of being a primary care doctor, as you know, is that you get to hear people's stories. And the stories that you hear are so different from the common narrative about disease and illness and survivorship. And so very early on, I recognized that's where the money is, really, people telling their own stories. The next poem that we're going to see presented, a poem called Perfect Soldiers, was actually presented at the Institute of Medicine, which is the most prestigious body in American medicine. And it was the first time that a poem was ever recited to the Institute of Medicine. And it was an audience of largely white men in white coats who gave the then 19-year-old a standing ovation for this poem. So I think it speaks, the test, what do you call the test when the hair stands on your head? What's powerful about the poems is that these are not just poems for other teenagers. They're poems that also move anybody who's a stakeholder for young people.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's screen Perfect Soldier.
My grandpa flashes a gold tooth when he smiles, like I dare you to take something from between my lips. His tooth shines from the light of the TV screen when my family watches Telemundo during dinner time. While I practice my Spanish, Grandpa unhinges the English from his mouth, at least for a little while. This is how we both learn to be Panamanian American, through television and food. He tells us of our ancestors, how they raised maize and yucca from the earth, hands steeped in indigenous soil. How as warriors, we drank cacao and water bitter from the gourd, a medicine sacred to the gods. Between growing up in Colón, Panama, and a tour in the U.S. Army, Grandpa is a proud old soldier marching through a never-ending war. At 66, we are scared that another stroke could do what no war ever could and cut him to the ground. He drinks. Like Aunt Maritza didn't lose both of her legs to diabetes last year. Like half of our neighborhood doesn't look like the emergency ward of a hospital, like he hasn't seen the pictures. How it is impossible to tell the difference between a roadside bomb victim and someone who just forgot to take their insulin. Grandpa keeps at least 2 12-packs of soda in the fridge at all times. Sunny Delight, Tampico, High C, a jug of Kool-Aid in the back. Dr. Pepper lines our refrigerator door like a vest of dynamite, an arsenal of ways for us to self-destruct. It is how you learn to drink, growing up in a country where soda is cheaper than clean water, where hunger is a canal carved deep into your belly, where the only options for work are the docks and the army, because your country is as occupied by Coca-Cola as it is by the US military. When you must march to the call of whatever feeds family first, you drink whatever fits conveniently in your hands. I understand, Grandpa. But don't you know we are still at war with a country that wants us dead? How us children of Panama and America learn early to walk softly and carry a big stick like US assault rifle in one hand, Coca-Cola bottle in the other. Our country wasn't enough. They're colonizing our bodies, our taste buds. It isn't a coincidence that the military and beverage companies call us their target audience. Our black and brown bodies marching to the center of their crosshairs. At home, a Coca-Cola commercial followed by a US Army commercial flickers across my grandfather's tooth, and they both shine like the discharge of a gun. I learned to drink like Grandpa, like Colón Panama, like $14 billion spent on soft drink advertising last year. The threat of diabetes is as common in our family as hard work, obedience, and discipline. It is as common as Coca-Cola in our refrigerator, and we drink until the glass is empty. Cause we ain't never learned to pull maize from the soil, but we did learn to pull the tab of a Coke can. Don't it sound like the linchpin of a grenade? Both explode under pressure, ain't we just time bombs then? We march until they cut the legs out from under us. Ain't we perfect soldiers?
Wow, that's powerful.
Can I just make one quick comment, Tony?
Sure.
Because these are, highly well-produced, beautiful, videography. The grandpa is Hodari's dad. These are videos made with friends and families in our garages. Mm-hmm. And, you don't need the $1 million Madison Avenue approach, is what I'm saying. And, he was fantastic.
Yeah, that's why I took the picture while it was showing, so I can send it to him. Like, look, you're on in San Diego.
Great. Okay, well, we really want to get to questions, but before we do that, we want to get to Yosi, another poet who, come on up, Yosi, who can give us a perspective from the immigrant experience. Yosi's been with Youth Speaks, or started with Youth Speaks over a decade ago.
Yeah.
So he's an old soldier here. So
Yes. Buenas noches. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Oh, I like this. So y'all get it. My name is Yosimar Reyes. This poem that I'm going to be reading is titled Lost in Translation. And it's about my abuelitos. Goes like this. Growing up, my nickname was Gordito, an endearing term that a lot of our familias used to show us their affection. In English, gordito translates to fatty. I guess it's true when they say some things simply get lost in translation. De cariño, my familia would buy me my favorite snacks, hot Cheetos con Tampico y una paleta de mango con chile. Never did I imagine these sweet gestures of love were actually poison. Un veneno neatly packaged in colorful wrappers and sold to us as cultura. To us, we were far away from home in a strange land with a new language too heavy on our tongues for us to speak it. Miles away from home, we found ourselves situated between two liquor stores on the same block, eating poison to nourish our bodies. No more milpas in soil or open sky, just 12-hour shifts, great concrete and noise. Labels with words we can't read, much less pronounce, and Fanta commercials promising to quench our thirst. How far we have come from the origins of our lands, migrated to a place where everything is commercialized, uprooted from the ways of our abuelos. We find ourselves lost, trusting corporations to tell us that what we're ingesting is substantial to our living. No one really tells you that being gordito is cute when you're a baby, but slowly your body grows tired. Like closed borders, you grow up caged, atrapado between social conditions and foods you cannot afford. Your taste buds become addicted to additive sugars found in Coke. We drink, pensando that our intake is harmless, but over the course of our time, our body ingests pounds of sugars. Azúcar, cantaba la gran Celia Cruz. And it is ironic that though we're a festive people, some of us move our hips lower to the rhythm just trying to catch our breath. The free foods we trust to give us nourishment are slowly killing us. A sweet venom que corre por nuestras venas. And though they tell us to read the labels, how many of our abuelos will understand words that to the average American are impossible to pronounce? Abuelo sits back in his memories, tells of a time in which he ate from the land, when the cocos fell from trees and the mangoes were the only sweets our tongues used to rejoice in. How far we have come from the origins of our lands, nuestros cuerpos lost in translation, our costumbres left to dry in deserts, and our grains monopolized by corporations. Pero nosotros somos la respuesta. If we remember of a time in which the land was not something we were afraid of, in which the harvest of vegetables called for celebration, nosotros somos la respuesta. In remembering nuestras costumbres, nuestra comida, nuestra lengua, it is time to return to the way of our ancestors. Muchas gracias.
We've got two microphones. We'd love to have some questions from the audience, and I see movement that's away from the microphone. Any movement
Some
towards...
of just a little bit about how we deploy this work. Obviously, we have a website, thebiggerpicture.org, where there's a lot of films and lesson plans and toolkits for teachers to use the films and engage them in classrooms and schools. We do a lot of school assemblies. We've done school assemblies all over the Bay Area primarily, really to get where the young people are and where the American Beverage Association is trying to be. That's where we want to be. We're making commercials and we're trying to compete with Coca-Cola and Pepsi on a dime and an idea and a lot of passion. So we're trying to make 15-second, we're trying to make 30-second, we're trying to make 3-minute, we're trying to do any sort of format where a young person in particular or an educator or a public health professional seems to think is valuable and impactful in raising awareness and countering the crisis. So there's a number of different ways that we're trying to use this material to engage people on the ground. It's not just something that lives online and we come to great audiences like you and kind of show it to you in the sky. But really we go into middle schools and high schools and show it to the young people directly and try to engage them in the conversation.
All right, Robin.
So this was fabulous. I just loved it. I have a question for the two young men at either side of the array there.
They answer in verse. Everything is in verse.
Okay, excellent. I want to know what response you get from other youths when either when you tell the stories or when you try to recruit them into doing this work. What kind of response do you get? Do you find there are certain people who are really drawn to this? Do you have to talk people into it? What's the response?
I'll go first. You're gonna beatbox for me? Or? Well, I think just like social media is such a powerful tool, and Youth Speaks throughout my young rap career, Youth Speaks has given me such a great platform to express myself and tell my story. And in this particular situation, like how Hodari was saying, the way it's so compacted into this 4-minute video is such an effective way to spread information. All the youth are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and when they watch this video, it's so easy. With the click of a button, they can share it, and all these stats and ideas are shared to everyone. But the real thing I noticed is that not only kids, but my parents and adults were super into this video. It was like the rap video my dad could send to his friends and say, "Look, my son's a rapper. It's okay though." But yeah.
I think for me, there's a video to the poem, and then I'm an immigrant, so we work really hard, so we translated it in Spanish too. So it's in complete Spanish. But one of the beautiful things, specifically with spoken word and knowing the bilingualism in the poetry, and I love that most of these videos are online, and it's an array of experiences. And the Bay Area is such a diverse place. One of the bigger things, specifically with Latinos, is the access to language. And oftentimes that becomes a huge barrier in communication. And I think when you present something that's relatable, it's, my grandma would kill me because she'd hear me talking Spanglish. She's like, right, talk right. But this is how I think youth are communicating and embracing both cultures and really taking this narrative and presenting it. I think a lot of the youth that we presented to are really resonating. And also the same thing, so accessible. It's like, it's something you could do when we do the writing workshops. This is something that they see themselves emulating and like, oh, this is so easy. I can do this.
Yossi, say a little bit though about when you were mentoring Gabriel, how hard was it to get the young poets into this project?
So when we were mentoring, they were like, oh, we need you to write poems about diabetes. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess we can make it happen. But one of the beautiful things is that they paired us up, and we actually went through an educational process of really learning about the impacts, and we read the statistics, and we really went. And one of the things was that you don't really pinpoint it, right? And it was really important for us to see how it's true. Like, why are there 2 liquor stores in my neighborhood? Why is there no parks? Why can't we, certain areas to run? Why is the, freeway, why are we living in certain areas where toxins are polluting the air? And then that's when we began to kind of really analyze and really start thinking, really looking at the bigger picture of what causes these things. So it was a really, really beautiful experience. And I think we all came out of that cohort and we developed these amazing poems.
Yeah, it's important to think, Yosimar had 5 people in his workshop. Four of them wrote poems that were so compelling that they're films on our website. So, giving it up for Yosimar, not only as a poet, but as a teacher as well.
We have another question, and we want to actually close this out with the last film. So,
okay.
Go ahead.
I'll be fast. But my first comment is to Yossi. As an immigrant myself, let's quote Lin-Manuel and say that immigrants, we get the job done. So congratulations to you. My question is really to the doctor. So a lot of this is about tapping into what is wrong, and there's a villain here. If you could give a prescription to your patients for something positive that they could do to change their behaviors, what's that prescription that you would write?
Well, first I would say that's not what this project is about. It's a very complicated question that you asked. There is no one answer to it. I mean, I think for me, it really comes down to 3 things. Understanding their vulnerabilities, what are the conditions in which they are living, the social conditions, whether it's low literacy, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's domestic violence, understanding those, then understanding the resilience factors and assets that they have that they could bring to bear in light of whatever health risk they're facing. And then it's hearing their story so that I can develop a therapeutic relationship with them over time to help them move towards health. And it is a very, at times, immediate process, and other times it can take 30 years, and I can tell you stories about the 30 years, and I can tell you stories about the immediate. But for me, that's how it works.
And we know that, our traditional health education really does sort of track the narrative of personal responsibility, looking at your individual behavior as if you live in a vacuum. and you're making choices across a broad spectrum of options, when in reality, many low-income people don't have those choices.
And actually, to this point, when I do talk to my patients, whether it's about nicotine addiction or sugar addiction and marketing, and change the conversation to the fact that they are being victimized in this way, they are much more apt to want to change their behavior than if I say, stop drinking soda.
Okay, if we can go to our, does anyone want to set up the final?
Before we, the last film is really kind of a film that is like the manifesto, young people making their statement. But there's a couple of people, names that I really feel like are important. The films are made by one filmmaker named Jamie DeWolf. He's made 24 of 26 of our films. He's the primary filmmaker for The Bigger Picture. Many of these films have won awards, so it's, we can't do a whole presentation and not acknowledge the filmmaker being dynamic, and please clap it up for the filmmaker. The second in person is we have two program managers, Sarah Fine, who works at Center for Vulnerable Populations, and Natasha Huey, who works in our office, who really carry primarily the management of the workload of The Bigger Picture. And so even though we get to come out to great places and fly to like beautiful, luxurious hotels to talk about it, there's some people back at the office working right now to make it happen. So, and now this is Health Justice Manifesto.
Hold on. Well, before we do it, I just want to say Jade Cho is the person who wrote this poem. And Jade, she was in our first cohort. She's a Chinese-American girl. And I'll never forget, somewhere in the third day of the workshop, she turned to me and she said, because diabetes in Chinese-Americans is not that prevalent, she said, this actually isn't speaking to me. I'm not getting turned on in the way that you described, Yossi, your cohort. And I remember just saying, just hang in there. And this is what she came up with.
1. We want an end to type 2 diabetes in young people. We believe that by causing diabetes, greed-blinded corporations and deficient living conditions are directly responsible for blinding, maiming, and killing thousands annually.
This disease overwhelmingly devastates poor people of color.
1 in 3 Latino children.
1 in 2 black children who are born in 2000 will develop diabetes in their lifetime.
This is no longer our grandparents' disease, but a reality of heart attack, severed limbs, and impotence
that many of us will face in the next 10 years.
If we do not hold the food industry
and government responsible for their crimes.
We believe that by sharing our stories,
organizing our communities, petitioning the government,
and bettering our lifestyles, we can determine the future of our health and communities.
We want affordable, healthy food, fit for consumption by human beings. We believe that health should not have a price tag.
That quality food should be available in all schools,
workplaces, and neighborhoods.
Today, a bunch of broccoli costs more
than a full meal at a fast food restaurant.
There are no grocery stores in poor neighborhoods, but liquor stores and fast food chains on every block.
These are not conditions where we can expect to live long, healthy lives.
We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of the decadent American food industry.
We believe it is our right to know where our food comes from and how it is made.
What animal does a hot dog come from?
What exactly is disodium glutamate?
The food industry sells us healthy brands and options.
Made with the same corn products with the same sugar content.
By the same 4 major corporations.
We believe that when we educate ourselves and our communities,
and through boycotting and media pressure,
force the food industry to be more transparent.
These artificial foods will no longer be accepted.
We want safe spaces in our community to exercise and play.
We believe it is the individual's responsibility to maintain physical fitness. However, it is nearly impossible for those of us who live in neighborhoods without safe streets, parks, or playgrounds, where the nearest substitute is often inside a fast food restaurant's playpen. Recreational facilities are readily available for wealthy neighborhoods, while abandoned fenced-off lots dot the landscape of low-income communities.
We demand the redistribution of local government funds
to make these resources available to all communities.
To all communities across California,
regardless of income.
We want you to take action.
We want you to take action.
We want you to take action.
We believe, in accordance with the above demands,
it is the individual's right and duty
to make steps towards making these beliefs reality.
We believe the revolution is yours to lead.
Yours to lead.
To lead.